Okay, here we go. All right, let's do it. Okay. So I was hoping to see a little more people here, but that's okay. The end of the month kind of sneaks up on everybody. So to everyone who comes back and watches this later, first of all, thank you. My name is Cody Britton, and this is the U.S. Government S1 Live Study Session. Today is 7/31/2018. It is noon my time, so it's lunchtime for me, which I'm super excited for. This doesn't matter. Let's keep going. In the future, when you guys come through this with me, you'll know right away that I'm a pretty outgoing and talkative guy. So these operate so much smoother for me, I think, if I get a lot of questions. Like I said, I love talking. You'll soon find out. But as we're kind of going through this, just kind of making sure that we're respecting the learning process still. Some of this might be very easy for you. Some of this might be a little more review for you, but it's still helpful, I think, nonetheless. So, as you're going through something, if I'm covering something that might sound a little bit boring to you, just be patient. We'll get to something a little bit better. If you are having some problems with some of the stuff that I'm going through, or it doesn't make sense, isn't clicking, whatever, shoot me a message, or you can unmute yourself and do it that way. My big rule, especially even in my own classroom, is just there's no dumb questions. Anytime that you have a question about anything, just shoot me something. I can try to cover that for you. Be cool. Have a good time, right? And most importantly, learn something. So it's kind of what my job is. I want to make sure you at least pick up something. So this will hopefully go by super smooth for you. And since I don't have a big crowd today, I'll be able to get through this pretty fast. So the lineup for today, usually I like to have a little introduction to me, maybe like a little current events thing, tell you kind of what's going on with me, just to kind of make it seem like you're not just dealing with a robot every time you come and log in. Today we're going to cover identifying bias, right? I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to it. Specifically more what is it, what is it about? If someone joins by the next point, we would have a Q&A session. And then the meat of this is going to be kind of covering 6.4.1, which is an analyzing political cartoons assignment, which students do really well with, but sometimes when they cover it, I see that they kind of miss the scope a little bit of what they're looking for. So I saw that as a good opportunity to kind of provide you with some help to, I guess, kind of make more sense of it. So, and like I said, if we get more people that show up, then we'll have some more questions or whatever we have to cover just to kind of keep people caught up. But yeah, I'll probably use a very similar lineup for most of my videos that I do with you guys just to kind of keep it consistent so I'm not throwing you curveballs every day. So, okay, let's get going. So, what is bias, right? When you do rewatch this and come back through this, try to think about, I guess, before you get to where I define it, try to think a little bit more about what it actually is, right? You hear the word all the time, and sometimes it might sound like it's easy, but I think a lot of times people think they know what bias is, but they're not entirely sure what exactly it is. And I think once you start understanding what it is and how it's used, especially in our daily lives, you'll realize, one, you see it just about everywhere, and two, it's actually pretty easy to spot. And I know for me, being a high school teacher, a lot of times, high school students, especially freshmen, tend to be biased towards a lot of things like no homework and longer breaks and things like that, right? So we'll cover that too. So. So to define it, bias is a way of thinking that generally only tells one side of the story, right? Think about if you are trying to get somebody to like something, you're trying to persuade somebody to like something, right? A lot of times what that is that's your biased opinion, right? If you think that something is good, but you dislike something else, and you're trying to explain this to somebody, you're going to make the thing you like sound pretty good, right? And so that's biased. Having an opinion is biased, right? Because you still are kind of trying to make it sound like you feel one way about something, right? What we see now, especially in the current political climate with media, social media, and the like, we see it in news all the time, right? Other social media outlets, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you name it, it's probably there, right? Instagram, for example, right? Everyone takes pictures of their food, correct? Now, this is a little bit of bias because everyone who takes an artistic photo of their food is probably saying this is the best food ever, right? When we know better, there's all kinds of better foods, right? But sometimes bias can be used a little bit negatively. It can be used to kind of promote things that you might not necessarily think are good, but someone might think it is, right? Unfortunately, like anything, especially with outlets and access to the public, it can be used for good and it can be used for bad. And I think after we cover a little bit more with what bias is, I think it'll make a little more sense as to, I guess, helping you identify good and bad when it comes to bias, right? So let's take a look at an example. So you're reading in a very, very esteemed published doctor's journal or something like that, right? You come across a quote that says, everyone should be eating ranch dressing. It is the best thing for you and your diet, right? This is said none other than by Dr. Hidden R. Valley, right? I know it's a bad joke. The website, though, that it came from, www.ranchdressingisgreat.com. Something here should stick out to you, right? Whenever I look at a quote or whatever, I'm looking for, I guess, a source to see where somebody or why somebody might have said something. I always look at where or who wrote it, okay? If you're getting your information about ranch dressing from a website that says ranch dressing is great, chances are they're not going to tell you any of the bad things about ranch dressing. That is bias. Right? Understanding that the unwillingness to explain the other side, that creates that notion of bias, right? So this is kind of a poor example. I just think it's funny because I'm very good at dad jokes. And so hopefully when you watch this, you'll think it's funny too. Let's keep going. So why does it matter? Bias tends to be an unfair practice, right? It shows preference. Now, this isn't to say that just because you have a preference, you are being unfair, but when you only show one side and you refuse to show the other side, that seems to be a little bit unfair, right? And a lot of times if you're using it to write or publish or to give out news, it can misinform a reader or it can misinform a viewer if it's on television, right? Think about like if you were younger and you used to lie to your parents or your guardian or whoever was there, so you didn't get in trouble, especially if you have siblings. Now, I do not have siblings, but I can imagine that I would be trying to get that other sibling in trouble often, just knowing my own personality, right? It's the classic, yeah, but he did this, this, and this, and it wasn't as bad, right? You're obviously biased towards yourself because you don't want to get in trouble, right? So kind of think about that as you go through. I always try to see both sides of the story, right? If any of you are parents, I mean, you probably have to do this quite often, understanding both sides of the story, right? And also probably looking to say, is the is the story that's being told even true, right? Unfortunately, that's not just something we experience in our private lives. We experience it everywhere as well. So some ways that you can use in your everyday life, reading whatever you choose to identify this kind of thing, just simply read things carefully, right? Look for something that sounds a little bit strange, sounds a little bit more like an opinion, right? Always look for the tone, always look for the vocabulary that's used, right? If someone is standing on top of I'll say a podium, right, giving a speech, and they're saying it is the best, something is the best thing ever, right? That kind of language, that kind of vocabulary, right? Instead of saying the sky is blue, you would say, if you were biased, you'd be like, the sky is the most beautiful blue you've ever seen in your life, and there's no competition, right? That seems a little bit inflated, right? The vocabulary doesn't really match up. So if you look more about what you're reading, right, you'll start to see those kind of things. Once you see enough opinions, right, this is why editorials or op-eds or any kind of things that you see in newspapers are always opinionated, right? And they have to make sure they let you know that, because someone's going to complain. Maybe someone's throwing garbage away or in the wrong spot, right? And you're going to have those really angry letters from people in newspapers, right? Those are all opinions, right? And those will show in bias. Read the headlines. Now, it's important to note that headlines are made to grab your attention, right? Right away, grab your attention from something, right? So if you're reading through the paper, right, the first things you're going to see are the large letters that are up top, right? No, this isn't because you can't read fast. This is just because this is how your brain works, right? You start picking up those flash words, those big block letters, the shapes. You pick all that up immediately. Your brain is very, very sensitive to those kind of things, right? So for example, an angry mob attacks police sounds a whole heck of a lot different than police encounter a peaceful protest, right? Just hearing those two different things, right, suggests two completely different experiences, right? Believe it or not, though, a lot of headlines are drawn to shown bias, right? You guys have maybe heard of clickbait, right? BuzzFeed is notorious at this right now. If you're one of those people that uses those surveys to figure out which Disney princess you are based on what you eat for dinner, don't worry. It's okay. That might actually be true, but it's still that kind of mentality that draws you in, right? Gets you to click on it. It's the same with headlines, right? Show something that people want to see so that they're able to kind of jump in and read. Because once you're reading, they got you. They did their job, right? Always listen for tone. Listen for any kind of negative, positive, any kind of vernacular that's being used or said that tries to make it sound like they're trying to push a point, right? If someone is just giving you facts, perfect. If someone is trying to convince you of something, it is automatically almost assumed that it can be biased, right? So keep that in mind. This is something I actually use in my own classroom, right? If any of you were in U.S. history in school, a lot of public schools still use this, or whatever your previous experience in classes were. This is a very popular political cartoon that showed up. Now, to give you a little bit of background on what this image is about, think about the times, right? This image was produced when all of the steel companies, right, the oil companies in the early 1900s were taking over everything, right? And all of these people had all of the money, right? Now you can imagine what this is like, right? Because companies that have complete control over over a market, right? The workers are kind of forced to do what those people want. Think of Comcast. Comcast owns a lot of media outlets and a lot of entertainment that you were able to kind of experience on a daily basis, right? So what this showed during this time was this is supposed to be Congress, right? Now, if you look carefully at these people here, right, the bigger men in the back, they all have names on them, okay? All these are names of companies, but if you look a little bit closer towards their neck, you'll see drawstrings, right? And then you'll see what looks like a collar up here. These people are being made to look like money bags, right? Which that is showing bias against these companies, right? They're saying that these people are being monitored or taken care of by these, by this unfortunate system of money and wealth, right? Monopolies, if you will. So yes, there is bias because they're making these people look bad, right? You can see that up in here. So it's kind of a stretch, but this is usually a pretty good one that shows kind of the I guess the mood towards these people, right? If you look at this, do you think that these companies were being well represented or cared about? The answer is probably not, right? So Keep that in mind. This is a great, to me, this is a great picture to always look at. But when we're getting closer to where we'll start talking about the political cartoons, always look at the side headings and what the writing on the walls are, what the writing in the pictures are, right? The label of this is called the bosses of the Senate, right? So you look at these people and you assume money is in charge of the Senate. That's a bad thing. Up top, entrance for monopolists. Monopolies are basically when one company owns every bit of a market, right? If me and three other people open a steel company and I get a lot of money and I buy all three of the steel companies, now I own the steel market. That unfortunately is illegal here in the United States. We have a lot of antitrust laws, but this is kind of what it's made to show, right? So keep that in mind as we get to 6.4.1. Oh yeah, let's take a break. Okay, break over. What I wanted you to think about though during this break is where do you, now that you learned a little bit more about bias, where do you think you've encountered it, right? Keep that in mind a little bit as you go through, okay? Okay, let's do this. 6.4.1, analyzing political cartoons, right? First of all, like any assignment or standard or any kind of thing that I give in a classroom, I always like to explain why we're doing this, right? The essential, Mr. B, why am I getting this or why am I learning this? When will I ever be able to use this is my favorite and least favorite thing to answer in a classroom. But now that I've been asked it plenty, I continue to make sure that I'm satisfying that answer every time. So this assignment will make you look for major tabloid political cartoons, right? Things that you see. The websites that's provided, I think it's Town Hall that this the Graduation Alliance uses, which is fantastic because I use Town Hall in my daily life as well. But what it does is it gives you up-to-date just political cartoons. You're just looking at what artists are writing and putting in papers, right? But what you'll do with this assignment, right, it challenges you to pick three different political cartoons and kind of analyze them a little bit. I picked one that we'll go through, which will give you a little bit of a head start as to how to start looking at how things are written, how things are drawn, etc. But what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to kind of look at this, I hope, after reading what bias is, you'll be able to learn a little bit more about how artists or publishers can write or produce something that sways opinion a little bit, right? So what you'll be doing when you do this assignment, right, is you'll be looking at how to identify bias. A great skill to have. Challenging you to learn other points of view, right? A lot of times what we hear in these situations is, you know, oh, that's wrong because I don't agree with it, right? What this does is by looking at someone else's portrayal, right, you'll be able to think, well, maybe I understand a little bit more how they feel, which is important. It also challenges you to form your own opinion, which to me personally is the biggest thing, which leads me to my like next little side note that I always like to explain with these kind of things. In my experience over the last year, a lot of students, when they do this assignment, they come back to me with, I don't care about this, or why should I care about this? This doesn't apply to me. Here's what I'll say. That's fine. What I would challenge you to, though, is instead of saying you don't care about it or you don't see the reason to, you have an opinion about it, though. You still have some kind of feeling that makes you feel a little bit differently about something, right? You agree or disagree with things that are happening in the world, right? Now, you don't need to follow everything, absolutely not. You don't have to follow everything that's written in the news or things like that. And especially now in 2018, I think you can all agree with me, it's getting to be a little bit difficult, but the reason why having an opinion, at least, just identifying that you have an identifying that you have an opinion, the reason why that matters is because it's your way of caring about where you live, right? If you are living in an area that has awful roads, like me, I live in Michigan, so we are doomed to having 6 months of construction and then 6 months of winter, which destroys all the construction work that was done in summer. When people say, hey, we're going to pass this new bill to get new roads, you better believe I'm all about that because one, tires aren't cheap, right? Brakes aren't cheap. I'm sick of having to run through shocks on my car every year because we're out of roads, right? Someone always floats around the idea of civic duty. Now, having an opinion and caring about your surroundings, I don't necessarily think that's your civic duty. I think civic duty tends to get towards more towards voting. But civic duty still can be just something as simple as caring about what's happening on your block, caring about what's happening maybe on your street, caring about maybe what's happening in your local park if you have kids or you or yourself that go play or walk through these areas, right? All of those things, caring about what's around you and the people that are there, those are all important things to care about, right? Now, while you might not be the most involved with politics, with news, with ongoings in the world, just identifying that you have an opinion is super important. So, and if you have any questions about that, I love fielding that question. So please reach out. All right, back to it. 6.4.1 continued. You have to pick 3 different cartoons, identify 3 different things when you do this. The first one, artist's message. Oh, I forgot a thing right here. Dang it. The artist's message is basically your way of telling me, what is this person saying? Why is he or she writing, they're drawing this thing, and what is it? What is the purpose of it? Are they making fun of something? Are they trying to make something seem more serious? Are they, well, I guess I don't really have any other examples other than that, but that's the idea behind the message. Okay. And then you have to kind of look a little bit inward and think about why you think it says what it says, right? If a person is telling you about something that's happening with healthcare, your job for the second point would be to sit there and say, okay, why is this person so enamored, or why does this person care so much about this, right? That's an important thing to know. And then the third point you have to do is you have to actually just formulate your own opinion, which again is a good exercise to put yourself through. After learning about something that you might not even know about, right? You come back to it and you say, hey, well, this might be wrong. I have an opinion about this, or I like this. I support this. There you go. You formed your own opinion. That is good. That's a really important skill to have. Why is understanding I can read well. Why is understanding the message important? Because a lot of times with this kind of thing, you want to make sure that you are understanding what is being asked of you, right? And those are all important things to kind of look at when you're going through. Oops, I did a thing. Shoot. Okay, we're back. Let me try this again. Understanding the message is important because it, one, shows that you are able to look at something and say, this is why this matters. And you should be able to do that when you look at news headlines, right? Or when you look at anything that you're looking at that's going to inform you about something, right? Understanding why it matters. Now, what I do with my own personal phone and things like that is I'm a big news guy, so I read a lot of news from around the world. But I personalize the kind of news that I want to hear about, right? I don't need to hear about underwater basket weaving in a different country. Those kind of things don't matter to me. But identifying why other parts of the news are important to me is something that I do with myself to make sure that I'm kind of keeping up on things, right? And to make sure that I'm getting the most accurate news. Let's keep going. Let's try one. This one was taken right from the website that you guys use, Town Hall. It's pretty good. It's 2 simple pictures here, right? On the left, it's a woman looking at her phone saying, Facebook lost all of my personal info. And then on the right, there's a sweatshirt, a guy wearing a sweatshirt that says Zuckerberg. And it says, Facebook lost billions. Now, there's 2 things already that jump out to me. On the right, you have a guy clearly who is supposed to be Mark Zuckerberg, right? And in this position, he's sitting there saying, oh my gosh, Facebook, the company that he started, lost all this money, right? Now, Facebook lost this woman's personal info, right? She uses his service. So it's a little bit different, right? This is supposed to be like the common citizen. This is supposed to be actual Mark Zuckerberg, right? Now, the question you should be automatically asking after you look at who's in it is why? Why is Facebook at the center of this? You can do a little research on this, but if you remember last month, Facebook was at the middle of a very, very serious security breach, right? Where they lost a lot of information that you willingly write when you give them access to your Facebook accounts, which you don't really have a say over, right? They were selling off this data to companies to be used for whatever marketing purposes this company wanted to do. In some cases, it was used to be sent to foreign governments, which is always a questionable thing for people, right? But what it does is it's talking about this woman, and her issue is my personal info is gone. Oh my gosh, how does this happen? And Mark Zuckerberg is looking at it and saying, oh my gosh, my company has lost billions of dollars, right? So the priorities there are a little bit different. And you can assume that the artist is probably trying to say, this is all he thinks about, and this is all she thinks about, right? So kind of keep that in mind when you look through more like this, right? The people inside aren't just drawn because the artist is good at drawing, right? A lot of times they're going to be sitting there shown, oh, well, maybe you'll see something in a drawing of a famous person that you recognize. Those kind of things, you know, are always, I guess, they're there on purpose to make you think about something, right? Like I said, what is going on in the world that makes this important? That was the data breach thing. And in the last week now, Facebook has now been reporting billions of dollars of losses because of the distrust that people have in their company now based on what they've done with data in the past, right? So I know I kind of went through that one pretty quick, but now that we've identified what's going on, part 2 of this assignment wants you to connect it to real life, right? Start thinking about why. Why is this important? Why is the portrayal of Facebook caring about millions of dollars? Why is that important, right? Take a look at this and make it a bigger issue. What role does media play in politics and government? It's huge now, right? A lot of political figures use social media as their way to communicate with their voters. Big deal right now, right? Understanding, though, that media, especially social media, in this cartoon's case, Facebook, understanding that they play a massive role in getting information to you, which is why it's so important that you are able to identify bias. Because if you're reading something or listening to something about a website that doesn't like a certain person or is supporting a certain political movement or is supporting animal rights or is against animal rights or whatever you choose or see, understanding that this might not be true, okay? It might just be made to convince you to be on their side, right? If I'm trying to get you to play on my team when we play kickball, and I tell you that I will give you all of the ice cream sandwiches in the world, right? This is me just trying to get you on the team, right? Now, I might be lying to you about how good I am at kickball or whatever, but I just want you on the team. So I will say anything to you to get you to join, right? That's a lot of times what we see in media outlets, right? Trying to get you to feel a certain way about something by flashing big images in front of you and things like that to make you feel certain bits of ways. That's bias, okay? Understanding that bias does that to you is super important. So when you're going through this, watching this video again, consider whether or not you think the media is a good thing or a bad thing when it communicates with the public. Obviously, we're all going to have very different opinions on this, and we're all going to have issues probably deciding if it even is efficient or not. But understanding that you might have an opinion on it, that's been the whole goal of this talk that I'm having with you a little bit, you know, about looking at something that's happening in the world around you and saying, this is good or this is bad. And you can feel however you want about it, but just try to have some kind of interaction with it. I think the questions that I've laid out in this short video for you, I think is going to explain a lot of things for you to make sure that you, I guess, better understand what bias might look like. Now, bias might look different to somebody than it does to you. Sure, that's okay. But understanding that if you think something is probably a little bit biased, chances are you're probably right, right? I say this in school all the time with my freshmen. If I think you're cheating on my test, I'm probably right, right? If it looks like it's not honest, it's probably dishonest, right? So keep that in mind a little bit as we go through. More questions I kind of wanted to have, and hopefully I wanted to go through this a little bit more with you. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough students. But what role do political cartoons play in your life, right? Are they important? Why or why not? What role does social media play in our lives? Is it effective to get news from social media or is it not? You might feel a certain way about that. Consider it. Also, then look at yourself a little bit and start considering why or how much news do you get from Facebook? How much news do you get from Twitter, right? Do you use other outlets? Do you not want to use other outlets? And what I wanted to do during this section is I wanted to get a little bit more of a thought process from you to kind of cover why you think the news that you get from wherever you get it is good or not, right? In no way was that supposed to be a challenge. It's more just, you know, hey, if you get your news from Twitter, how come? I just want to know. So kind of keep that in mind a little bit. If you want to interact with me or send me some emails a little bit more about this, I'm always willing to have this conversation, especially with people who are, genuinely curious about stuff like this. I mean, this is my job. I love this subject. So talking about this as much as possible is really good for me. And my wife would probably appreciate it if I was talking to somebody else about it other than her. So keep that in mind as we go through it. Hopefully we have covered this assignment enough with you to kind of explain a little bit better as to what I'm looking for when I grade it. Now, if you're worried that I'm looking for something specific, or if you're worried that you might offend me in any way or someone else or whoever reads the assignment, you can't. There's no way you can offend me by having an opinion. That's literally what you're supposed to have. So use this assignment kind of as a way for you to garner your own thoughts and a way for you to be able to adequately express how you feel about whatever it is that you choose to explain in your assignment, right? So as you go through that, really try to get into the assignment and give me some opinions and tell me what you're thinking. And if it gets to the point where, hey, I might send you a message, just say, can you explain this a little bit more? We might have a conversation about it, right? I do that because I love hearing about what my students think about things. So the more worldview that I can get from you guys, the better off I think we would be. So kind of keep that in mind a little bit as you go through the assignment, right? Don't just think that because you send it to me, I'm just thinking that, oh, it's another assignment to grade, boop, boop, boop. No, I love and I read all of these things because there's a few assignments that I care a lot about, and this is one of the big ones because it lets me kind of understand how you are as a person, and I like doing that. So, and I know how tricky that can be in the automated learning setup. So I just want to make that a little as much human interaction with you as possible. So I think that's it for me. Thank you so much for your time. Obviously, this will be posted so you can rewatch it as much as you can. You'll be able to hear my ranch dressing jokes in the beginning that you heard before that you really like. So I hope you learned something new, and I will be reaching out to you soon to kind of go over what we're going to be covering on my next topic. And if you have any questions at all, shoot me an email. So take it easy, guys.